Welcome to Life, Love, and Light. I'm Veronica Mary Rolfe, and in the second season of podcasts, we're exploring a fascinating variety of biblical mystics. These biblical men and women faced major challenges and crises in their lives, made some really big mistakes, even committed gross misdeeds. They were forgiven, received mystical revelations, and then dared to act on those revelations. Their stories may become powerful inspirations for us in our own time of crisis, danger, fear, and great spiritual uncertainty. Last week, we discussed the 3 heavenly messengers that appeared to Abraham and his wife Sarah, and who announced that in a year's time they would have a son. Even though both Abraham and Sarah laughed out loud at the idea, sure enough, Isaac was born the next year to this infertile and extremely elderly couple. We also reflected on our own heavenly visitors who have appeared from time to time in our own lives to comfort and warn, guide and inspire us on our spiritual path. Today, we will consider Jacob's deceits and dreams. Now, Jacob was Isaac's son and Abraham's grandson. You may remember that Esau and Jacob were twins who battled each other even when they were inside the womb of their mother Rebekah. Esau was born first, then Jacob. In Hebrew, Jacob's name means, quote, to follow, to be behind, but also to supplant, circumvent, assail, overreach. It comes from the word for heel, akeb. So Jacob, is named as one who seizes from behind. It's important to mention that the Esau-Jacob struggle is drawn from an ancient legend concerning the ancestors of 2 warring nations, Edom and Israel. Edom was the name of the well-known people south of the Dead Sea, mentioned by Egyptian sources as early as 1230 BCE. The Edomites considered Esau to be their figurative ancestor. So essentially, Esau is Edom. Edom is Esau. And Esau and Jacob, who would later be renamed Israel, were arch enemies. So the Esau-Jacob saga is really a long tale of 2 belligerent, warring nations. Esau and Jacob are their symbolic ancestors. Esau is characterized by the narrator of the story as a hunter, with reddish-brown skin and as hairy as a goat. Jacob is a shepherd, more yellowish-skinned like the northern Israelites, and smooth-skinned. Oh, how deep these ancient physical roots of racial prejudice were implanted. Esau, as a hunter symbol, lives from the daily hunt, from hand to mouth. If he has killed nothing, he becomes ravenous and goes to bed hungry. Whereas Jacob, the shepherd, does not kill animals, he raises them, and he farms the land as well, so he has bread and vegetables. And he stores away provisions and plans for the future, so he is not caught hungry in a time of famine. He is orderly and seen as respectable among his people. The story of Rebekah's plotting with her favored son Jacob to rob Esau of his birthright is not a happy family saga. Indeed, we find it loathsome, like so many ancient narratives in the Bible. But it is a tale of trickery and cunning that would have greatly entertained its Israelite listeners. There's even a distinct tone of sardonic humor in the details. The newborn baby Esau was as hairy as a goat. Esau sold his birthright for a bowl of soup. Israelites would have delighted in this far-fetched saga of one-upmanship over their sworn enemy, Edom. Simply told, Esau returns home from hunting and is desperately hungry. According to the narrator, he wants to gulp down the red stuff, in Hebrew, Edom, which characterizes his own name, Edom. Esau thinks that the thick pottage his brother was making was blood soup, his favorite dish. Jacob takes advantage of the situation and promises to give Esau the soup if he will sell his birthright for it. That is, his entire inheritance. In the desperation of the moment, not thinking of the consequences, Esau agrees. He just wants to eat, and eat now. But Jacob is cunning. He makes Esau solemnly promise to sell his birthright to Jacob in exchange for the soup. Only when Esau agrees and starts eating does he realize that the rich-smelling red stuff is not a meat dish at all, but merely lentil soup. That's the horrible joke. Well, it seems preposterous to hand over one's entire inheritance for a bowl of lentil soup. But the Israelites considered the Edomites to be utterly imprudent, so much so that they would actually fall for such a trick. According to the story, Esau, quote, ate, stood up, went away, and did not think about the birthright again. Again, boorish and irresponsible, even about his own birthright. According to one biblical scholar, quote, the legend ridicules the stupid Esau, who sold his entire future for a lentil dish, and rejoices over the clever Jacob, in whom the narrators recognize their own image. It's important to realize that in ancient Israelite law, the elder son was considered to be the wiser, the more responsible, the more competent among his brothers. As the firstborn, he was considered the best and was offered to the deity. The first son inherited everything, so that the family property and animals would not be divided among siblings. And eventually the firstborn replaced father and mother and became his brother's lord. By forfeiting his birthright, Esau essentially became the servant of Jacob. And this is how the biblical narrators saw Israel in this saga, as superseding its southern neighbors. Even though Esau, Edom, was the older established people, according to this story, it has now become inferior to its brother Jacob, Israel, in might and wealth. And in this, the storyteller rejoices. Ancient listeners wanted Jacob to win out over Esau, no matter what form of deceit and trickery he used to do so. And as if this story wasn't bad enough, later in the saga, Jacob deceives his brother Esau again, once more urged on by his mother, Rebekah. Isaac, now old and blind and anticipating his death, wants to give his elder son Esau his final blessing. He calls for him and asks him to hunt game and then cook and prepare the savory dish of which he is so fond. But while Esau is out hunting, Rebekah calls Jacob and tells him to go and choose 2 goats from the flock so that Rebekah herself may prepare Isaac's favorite dish, and Jacob will present it to his blind father in the place of Esau, and thus Jacob will gain Esau's rightful blessing. Well, at first Jacob objects that because Esau is hairy and he is smooth-skinned, quote, "Perhaps my father will feel me, and I shall seem to be mocking him, and bring a curse upon myself, and not a blessing." His mother said to him, quote, "Upon me be your curse, my son. Only obey my word, and go, fetch them to me." So Jacob gets the 2 goats and brings them to his mother, who cooks and prepares the meat dish that Isaac loved. And then Rebekah takes the best garments of Esau and puts them on Jacob, and puts the skins of the goats on his hands and the smooth part of his neck, and she gives the savory dish and the fresh baked bread to her son Jacob. Again, deception through a meal. Jacob takes these to his father and says, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Now sit up and eat of my game, that you may bless me." Israel recognizes Jacob's voice and wants to feel Jacob's arm to be sure it is Esau. And when they embrace and kiss, Isaac also smells Esau's clothing and is too easily convinced it is actually Esau. "Are you really my son, Esau?" asks Isaac. Jacob answered, "I am." Isaac eats and drinks wine and embraces Jacob and gives his blessing. "See, the smell of my son is as the smell of a field which the Lord has blessed. May God give you the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth and plenty of grain and wine. Let peoples serve you and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you." Thus it was that Jacob stole his elder brother's final blessing from their father. It was a dastardly scheme. The tension mounts. Esau returns home with the goat he has slain and realizes that his father has already eaten and already given his blessing to Jacob. He cries out against his brother, "Is he not rightfully named Jacob? For he has supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and now, behold, he has taken away my blessing. Have you no blessing for me, father?" Tragically, Isaac can only predict that Esau will live in the wild. Quote, "Away from the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be, and away from the dew of heaven on high. By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. But when you break loose, you shall break his yoke from your neck." Throughout this story, Jacob is characterized as wily, and yes, even gravely deceitful in his actions. Certainly not heroic. But we must be aware that the Judaic concepts of right and wrong are not what these stories are about. The point of these stories was not to assign guilt, blame, or shame. One must be willing to set these biblical stories in their ancient context and not judge them according to a more developed moral code. We must not judge Jacob by modern ethical standards or take offense at the fact that these narratives are meant to entertain. They are not moral tales, and Jacob is not yet a mystic. And we must also grant the rough humor in these stories, while also realizing that the best humor almost always has an element of pathos and even tragedy at its root. The suffering human condition is never really funny. Indeed, these highly successful biblical pranks are hard to justify, especially in our own time, because we know what irreparable harm such lying, deceitfulness, and betrayal can cause in our own families and in our countries and in our world. The lies and collusion to commit crimes of national leaders ripple through our nations, and they erode the fragile fabric of trust. Too many people are tempted to think that lying and deceptive policies are okay if they enable one to succeed. But we know in our hearts they are not. They are always full of dire consequences. Every lie, every deceit, every evil intention will have results like it. And so it will be in the story. Now Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing, and said to himself, "The days of mourning for my father are approaching, and then I will kill my brother Jacob." Rebekah learns of Esau's murderous intention and tells Jacob to flee to her brother Laban in Haran and stay with him a while until your brother's fury turns away, and then I will send and fetch you from there. Now, in a different version of the saga, Rebekah convinces Isaac that Jacob should not marry a Canaanite or a Hittite woman as Esau had done, but rather return to Haran to seek a wife among the daughters of Rebekah's brother Laban. Isaac agrees, blesses Jacob, and sends him away. In either version of the story, because of his own deceitful actions, Jacob must leave his family and return to the land from which Abraham came. And his deception will eventually cost him 20 years of hard labor for his uncle Laban. From that day on, Jacob will never see his mother, Rebekah, again. And Jacob, in turn, will be cruelly tricked by Laban on his wedding night. Such are the results of deception. Now, even though the saga does not indicate any sense of remorse or regret on Jacob's part for his connivance and outright deceit of his blind father, the necessity of his immediate physical escape suggests there was terror in his mother's heart that he might be killed by Esau as Cain the hunter killed Abel the farmer. Yet, out of all this deception and inevitable danger, there will still be a blessed outcome. By the grace of Yahweh, even such serious sins will be brought to a fortuitous end. Indeed, this chapter of Jacob's life is not yet the whole story. It merely sets the stage for what is to come. In the divine plan, the revelation will still be given, even to the sinner. And for us, this story reveals a lot about how Israelites came to understand their patriarchal ancestors as deeply flawed human beings whom Yahweh forgave and guided and protected in spite of their sins, and to whom God revealed great promises. So Jacob fled his home in Beersheba and the wrath of his brother Esau, and stopped at a place called Bethel, which literally means house of God. But according to the story, when Jacob stopped to rest there, he had no idea it was a holy place, where in fact his grandfather Abraham had once pitched his tent east of Bethel in the mountains and offered sacrifice to the Lord. And, quote, taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place. And he dreamed that there was a ladder set up on the earth, the top of it reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And the Lord stood beside him and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac, and the land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. And your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east, and to the north and to the south, and all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you and in your offspring. Know that I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. And then Jacob woke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. So Jacob rose early in the morning, and he took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up for a pillar, and poured oil on the top of it. He called that place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at the first. And then Jacob made a vow, saying, If God will be with me, and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone, which I have set up for a pillar, shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will surely give 1/10 to you. An extraordinary dream. According to one scholar, the dream shows the gate of heaven, that is, the narrow place where, according to the ancient world view, all intercourse between earth and the upper divine world took place. And God's messengers go back and forth here continually, not bearing prayers to God, but fulfilling divine commands or supervising the earth. When we think of the ladder of heaven, we should not think of an actual ladder rising from the earth to the stars. That's far too literal. The Hebrew word sulam points to a ramp or a kind of stair-like pavement. And in this mystical dream, Jacob understands that this place is a house of God, where the Spirit of God appears, moving between heaven and earth. And later in the history of Israel, Bethel will become a famous cultic center with a building or a temple for worship, and this will be considered the gate of heaven. And through this extraordinary dream, Jacob realizes he stands at the entrance to the heavenly world. It is a theophany, a divine manifestation, as surely as those that were given to his grandfather, Abraham. And the words he heard in his dream were a solemn address to Jacob. Again, we hear the promise of land and posterity, and they echo this pre-Mosaic faith of Israel's ancestors. And we hear again that this blessing will go from them to all the families of the earth. So the promise to Abraham still holds. The land of Palestine will become Israel's land, and Jacob's offspring will be numerous, so that all the families of earth may receive a blessing. God will not forsake Jacob, even in his sinfulness. There's also a specific blessing for the emigrant Jacob, considering the dangers that will threaten him in the future. This blessing guarantees him protection throughout all that will befall him, and a promise of his eventual return to Palestine. Now, in Jacob's response, there has been called a bewildering experience of pious shuddering. That is a profound awareness that God is truly present in this holy place, in this revelation, through this dream. This is God's first revelation to Jacob. God offered divine protection, and Jacob responded humbly and totally. And his answer was not a form of bartering with God, but rather a grasping, a holding on to God with a threefold vow. First, he promises that Yahweh will be his God. Secondly, he promises to acknowledge God as the founder of the sanctuary in this holy place. And thirdly, he offers the practice of tithing in gratitude. What happened in this dream vision? It was much more than a consoling dream for Jacob at a critical juncture in his life. At the moment of his greatest need, a direct revelation of God occurred, a revelation that would affect Jacob's whole life. Why was such a great revelation of divine protection granted to a sinner? Because the deity uses whomever it chooses to fulfill its will. And God is always able to bring good out of evil. Notice, there was no condemnation by God of the crafty, deceiving young man. All that was revealed in the dream was the unbreakable assurance, the unconditional love that God bears for this man and his people. God's plan will not be thwarted, even by grave misdeeds. So we see here a very early understanding of God's beneficence and providential care, and also the obligation to be thankful, to acknowledge divine help, and offer worship. Jacob erects this sacred stone to mark the holy place. He must have been incredibly strong to do so, since these ancient stones were usually 7 feet high. And he pours oil on it, thus anointing and dedicating it to God. And those who came later to offer the tithe at Bethel believed that they shared in Jacob's blessing and in God's promise of protection and deliverance. So the Genesis story continues. Eventually, Jacob will marry Laban's 2 daughters, Leah and Rachel, and produce 12 sons, and thus become the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. But after many years, an angel of the Lord appeared to Jacob in a dream and told him to, quote, "Arise, go forth from this land, and return to the land of your birth," that is Palestine. Now Jacob realizes he must flee from Laban with his 2 wives, children, camels, and the plentiful flocks of cattle and goats that he has earned through hard labor. Once again, Jacob will find himself in a wild place, greatly afraid now, because his brother Esau is coming to meet him with a large army of men. So Jacob divides his large herds and flocks into 2 companies, so that at least one of them will escape Esau's vengeance. And then Jacob prays, "O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, 'Return to your country and to your kindred, and I will do you good,' I am not worthy of the least of all the steadfast love and all the faithfulness that you have shown to your servant. For with only my staff I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become 2 companies. Deliver me, please, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I am afraid of him. He may come and kill us all, the mothers with the children. Yet you have said, I will surely do you good, and make your offspring as the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted because of their number." So Jacob crossed the Jabbok River with his wives and children, and then he slept. And a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he struck him on the hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. And then the man said, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." But Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. So the man said to him, What is your name? And Jacob said, Jacob. And then the man said, You shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with humans, and have prevailed. And then Jacob asked him, Please, tell me your name. But the man said, Why is it that you ask my name? And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the place Penuel, saying, For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life is preserved. The sun rose upon him as he passed Penuel, limping because of his hip, and therefore to this day the Israelites do not eat the thigh muscle that is on the hip socket, because he struck Jacob on the hip socket at the thigh muscle. Whether this mysterious antagonist was an angel of the Lord in human form, or the Spirit of God in a dream, we cannot know. The original import of this story is shrouded in secrecy. What we may suggest is that Jacob wrestled, probably in his tortured sleep, really a nightmare, with his fear of Esau's vengeance and his guilt over the ways in which he had deceived Esau of his birthright and his blessing. Jacob's great strength prevailed for a while, but then the man or the angel, with overwhelming force, disengaged Jacob's hip from its socket, and so he fell to the ground. And then Jacob realized he was in the presence of a divine being. He begged for a blessing from his adversary, and the man asked Jacob's name, and when he gave it, changed it from Jacob to Israel, which means literally, may God rule. So Jacob realized that this adversary was not a man at all, but a divine messenger, or perhaps the Spirit of God himself. He begged to know the divine name, because to know the name of a god in ancient times meant to have power over it, or to be able to subdue it. But the man would not give his name, only his blessing. So Jacob named the place Penuel, because it was there that he had wrestled with God and lived to tell the tale. And immediately after, Esau arrives with his 400 men, and instead of threatening Jacob, he runs and embraces his brother, weeping with gratitude that Jacob has returned. There is no mention of their former enmity. There is only forgiveness and reconciliation. And Jacob cries with relief that seeing his brother was like seeing the face of God, which he believes he just saw in his dream. Was the dream a foretaste of reality? What are we to discover from these strange but intriguing stories, these astounding dream revelations? First of all, that no matter our faults and mistakes, even our grievous sins, God does not abandon us. God still guides and blesses us, even pursues us. God may even use the inevitable consequences of our misdeeds for God's own purposes. God may wrestle with us in a dream or a nightmare to get us to come to terms with the mistakes we've made, the wrongs we've inflicted on others. We may argue with God for days or weeks or years, but we will not win. God will shake us up at the core of our being in order that we might receive a divine blessing and a divine healing. And second, God's protective love is always available to us. God does not turn away from us, although too often we turn away from God and think we're doing fine on our own. That is, until we hit a wall of obstruction, a mountain of sorrow or we experience the terrible consequences of our misdeeds. And then, like Jacob, we must flee, but not away from God, toward God. And we must take time to be alone with God in prayer, on a retreat, in our daily meditation, so that we may admit our past mistakes, feel the overflow of divine forgiveness, and pray for guidance. And then surely we will be guided. God promises divine protection always. We have only to be humble enough to ask for it and open enough to receive it, like Jacob. And how will we receive the guidance? Well, it may come suddenly in the form of a personal help we never even expected, or in a confession and a granting of forgiveness, or in a surprising turnaround of a bad situation that we would not have predicted. Or divine guidance may appear vividly in a dream, as an image or a phrase or a single word. And when we wake up, we realize we have received a divine message, and then we must give thanks for it. Dreams are full of hidden gifts, if only we take time to ponder their meaning. Sometimes the meaning of a particularly vivid dream requires extended meditation to decipher. We have to go deeper than the dream in a waking state, in silence and in stillness, when we are alert, watchful, attentive. Then the dream will reveal its secret to us. And sometimes a simple graphic image that appears in a dream may evoke memories we need to investigate or reevaluate. Someone may be reaching out to us from beyond the grave through the dream. And sometimes in a dream we will hear a word or a phrase or a play on words that makes sense only to our particular situation, and that suddenly speaks to us. And then we must listen intently. Sometimes a dream will involve a sense of foreboding. We wake up in the middle of the night in a sweat, and we know that this is what we must pray about. And other times, a dream will fill us with a sense of light and consolation and peace, and we wake up with renewed hope and courage and a sense of deep purpose. And this too is revelation. One scholar commented on this Jacob saga, "No reader can overlook the fact that this story unfolds under a particular divine sign, and that in it, in profound secrecy, of course, God's plan is being accomplished." Yes, in fact, this extended story is like so many others in the Bible. It bears witness to God's preservation of the whole nation of Israel. And this in spite of their repeated sins and grave betrayals. Faith in divine protection underlines all these ancient biblical narratives. The main point in the whole Jacob account was that Yahweh's grace guided him on all his journeys, protected him through all his dangerous situations, and finally brought him home, richly blessed. And is this not true of all our own life stories? Is there not a divine plan for each and every one of us? Are we not also protected and guided and forgiven over and over again? And are we not meant to be always thankful for divine promises and divine protection? And should we not trust with all our might that the same God who created us will bring us home at last, richly blessed? Let us take this story into a short meditation. Sit with your eyes closed, hands folded in your lap, back as straight as possible, feet on the floor or cross-legged on a cushion. And begin with a cleansing breath. Allow the air to flow through your scalp, through your neck and chest, down your arms, into your hands and fingers, through your chest and abdomen, down through your legs, into your feet and toes. And with the breath, allow a wave of relaxation to flow through your entire body. Almost as if you had just lain down to take a nap and rest your head on a smooth stone. And now recall a vivid dream experience of your own. Perhaps from years ago, maybe even as far back as childhood. What did you see or hear in the dream? Were there colors, shapes? Was there movement? Was there a sound? How did the dream affect you at the time? Did it frighten you? Did it bring you comfort? Did it warn you? Did it offer a revelation of some kind? What image has stayed with you from the dream? What word or words? Did the dream help to clarify what was happening in your life? Or did it confuse you? Maybe even disorient you? Did you try to go deeper and explore its meaning? I suggest you take time over the next week or so to recall and remember the specific details of the dream as best you can. And allow the deeper mystical meaning of the dream to arise in silence. Seek the core of the revelation within your own heart. It is a treasure buried there, waiting to be discovered. And when you do unearth the mystery of the dream, give thanks that there is a ladder of divine communication between heaven and earth, between angels and humans. Amen. Please share this podcast, Jacob's story, with those you may know who are fleeing from or perhaps battling with God in their lives, especially during this time of pandemic and fear and great uncertainty. Perhaps this ancient story might open to them a way of receiving a divine revelation and God's blessing. And for those of you who wish to go deeper into the biblical mystics, I'm drawing on characters from my new book, Suddenly There Is God, The Story of Our Lives in Sacred Scripture, which won the 2020 Catholic Press Association Book Award for Scripture. Many of the themes I'm suggesting in the podcasts come from Suddenly There Is God. So it is available from the publisher, Cascade Books, either in paperback or as an ebook. And of course, it's also on Amazon worldwide. And if you'd like more information or wish to order the book for yourself, or perhaps for someone you love this Christmas, please visit my website, veronicamaryrolfe.com. Next week, we will delve into the story of Joseph, the favorite son of Jacob, now called Israel, who was sold into slavery in Egypt by his own brothers. It's a tragic story, with scenes of betrayal and deliverance, temptation, injustice, and a heart-rending scene of forgiveness, all of which reads like a modern novel. Joseph, like his father, received mystical revelations in dreams. In addition, Joseph could interpret the dreams of others. However, unlike his father, Joseph was a man of high moral stature, and for that he suffered greatly. The saga of Joseph and his brothers speaks to us today as a strong example of faith and courage in times of great crisis, just like our own. And it reveals yet again that God's protection will never abandon us, no matter how dire the circumstances. So I hope you will join us for this very dramatic story. So until next week, I wish you all the blessings of divine life, love, and light.